Hello and welcome to a very low energy August wrap up. I am Caroline, or Miss B overseas, and contrary to the forcefulness with which I just said hello, I am quite exhausted. If in this video I am talking about a book and saying how much I love it, but my face looks like I am about to fall asleep, please do not blame the book. So in the month of August, I was able to read 6 and 3/4 of a book, which I'll explain that later, or I guess I can just explain it now. I'm currently 3/4 of a way through a book. I tried my best to be able to finish it. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on me telling you about the books that I read in August. The first one being The Seep by Channa Porter, and it is a little astonishing to me that I finished this only a month ago because it feels like a lifetime ago. This is a lovely short little book that is set in the near future, where Earth has been invaded by this sort of alien life force called the seep, and the seep essentially infects humans in such a way where they create this utopian, idyllic society. Our main character is a trans woman named Trina, and you follow Trina's story. At the beginning, Trina's partner Deba informs her that she has made the decision to be reborn in a baby state, or reborn, what am I saying? Reborn as a baby, and you follow Trina's grief as she loses her lifelong partner and lifelong love. Trina kind of slowly throughout the story comes to the realization that there has been a loss of individuality and a loss of self that has kind of been spurred on by this society. I was actually quite pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed this book. It was definitely a book that I feel like I could have read in one sitting. One thing that I particularly appreciated about this book, it is quite bizarre, but I feel like so often books that are pitched or talked about as being so weird or so bizarre can kind of easily get confused with writing that is just super pretentious or contains a lot of extended metaphor. I have to commend this author for crafting a story that is so bizarre, but at the same time so engaging and so readable. Ultimately, I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I'm not quite sure if the ending was lost on me, or if the author just made the choice to kind of end the story not ambiguously, but just sort of without any sense of finality. Next book that I completed was Monsters of Men by Patrick Ness. This is the 3rd and concluding novel in the Chaos Walking trilogy. This story centers around the same characters from the previous novels. You also get some new characters coming in. To be expected with the final book in a trilogy, there's not a whole lot that I can tell you about this without spoiling the entire series. I can tell you that the world that this story exists in is sort of post-apocalyptic. Oh my god, why can't I say it? Post-apocalyptic. Earth has recolonized on this new planet, and on this new planet there is a disease called the noise that infects the minds of men and gives them the ability to hear every other man's thoughts. I was highly anticipating the end to this series, and I am so happy to report to you that this trilogy is what I am now calling my favorite series of all time. This final book in particular has a lot of commentary on war and violence and what constitutes war and violence. I also think that if you read any of Patrick Ness's work, you know what I'm saying when I say that he does really interesting things with the concept of monstrosity. It was very heavy and very brutal, and also, it was just the end to a story, which I understand that all stories have to end, and I think that Patrick Ness wrapped this one up just perfectly and beautifully, but it did come to an end, and because of those reasons, I did mark this book just in its monstrous self as 4 stars, but the series overall is 5 stars. Next book that I was able to complete was actually a reread, and that book was Illuminae. And although it was a reread, I was rereading it in a different format. This time I reread it by listening to the audiobook. And if I've said this once, I've said this a million times. If you don't know what Illuminae is by now, I think it's just because you actively don't want to know what it's about. Let me give you the quick and dirty rundown. Illuminae, the first book, starts out with this attack on this tiny planet, and then the series kind of follows the lives of different characters who are related to that attack in some way, shape, or form, and they span different space stations. Ultimately, I did not have the same reading experience rereading it this time as I did my first time reading this book, and I think that has to do with 2 things. One is because it was a reread, and what made me love Illuminae so much the first time is because I really didn't know what to expect. And then the second reason was because I did reread it via audiobook, and while the audiobook is extremely impressive, they have this whole cast of characters, but one of my favorite things about reading the physical books is that the format just sucks you in. You as a reader on certain parts kind of get to pick how you read certain pages. Surprisingly, what really got me, and when I really started like, oh shoot, like super listening to the audiobook, was when Aiden, this murderous artificial intelligence on the Fritz system, started really getting its narration. There's a part where Aiden is describing one of the characters, Ezra, like in flight combat, and I was just so kind of stunned. It like brought me to tears, which is weird, and I don't know what that says about me. I don't know how to rate this, and I don't know if it's because I can't give a reread 5 stars, like personally, or if it's because I can't give an audiobook 5 stars personally, or if it's just because I miss the mixed media format so much. All of that's to say, I'm not rating this book. I'm sorry. Next book that I was able to finish in the month of August was Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. I almost thought that I was holding the book upside down, but no, it's just the cover art. This was a book that I picked off that scratch off poster that I have, that I'm kind of using to make my way through backlist titles. This is a young adult kingdom fantasy with some dystopian elements sort of sprinkled throughout in the world of the story. There are 2 societies that are literally divided by blood. There are the Red Blood Society that are kind of the working class citizens that are very much oppressed by the more elite Silver Blood Society, and the real reason why they are this elite society is because if you have silver blood, you possess some sort of magical power. The story follows our main character, Mare Barrow. She discovers that although she has red blood, she actually contains a power of her own, like those with silver bloods do. This book was published in 2015, and it kind of seemed like what the author did was just looked at every other big YA fantasy series that had been published in like the previous 2 to 3 years and then just smashed them all together. Personally, I didn't really feel like this story did anything new or innovative or amazing. I think that if 2015 Caroline would have read it, she might have quite enjoyed it. However, 2020 Caroline did not enjoy it and ultimately ended up giving it 2 stars. But I was able to scratch it off my poster and like fill in the star sticker and stick it on, so that felt great. The book that I completed this month was another audiobook that was fantastic, and that was The Death of Vivec Ogee by Akwaeke Emezi. This is an adult literary fiction, but it has mystery elements and intrigue elements. Right at the very beginning of this story, you learn that the main character, Vivec Ogee, has died. The story is told in reverse from there, kind of the events spanning Vivec's life leading up to that point. However, the timeline is non-linear. You get different characters' perspectives. Story takes place in Nigeria, and a lot of the plot centers around this group of women called the Niger Wives, and they all come together and support each other, and you follow the women's lives in this group. You also get to see the Niger Wives' children, and then how the children interact with their parents and the relationships that span within this sort of nucleus group. This story does that thing that I'm learning that I love in books, where no character, no matter how small or insignificant, no character's thoughts are off limits. This book actually got on my radar because earlier this year I read the author's debut novel, Freshwater, and while the writing in Vivec Ogee is brilliant and just the layering of the story itself is masterful, it is not the same writing as Freshwater. There are some themes that are similar between the 2 stories. Both stories feature main characters that are Black and trans and sort of coping with different mental illnesses. Because it spans several different families, I sometimes found myself getting confused about like who was related to who. Again, that has nothing to do with the book or the audiobook. It has more to do with me and my comprehension. If I wasn't clear, this is a 4.5 for now. However, I do have plans to reread the physical copy before the end of the year, and I have a very strong feeling that that will solidify it as a 5-star read. The next book I completed very recently. However, I did read it kind of over the course of the entire month of August, and that was How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others in America by Kiese Layman. Some of the essays in here were narrative and really focused more on Kiese Layman's life and his family. Some of them focused on his experience being Black and going to this elite and predominantly white university. Some of the essays were less anecdotal and more kind of commentary. There's commentary on music, there is commentary on politics. One essay in here that is not anecdotal or really narrative at all, and it's sort of him imagining himself like moderating a debate between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. What I loved so much about this collection of essays is just how strong Lehman's voice is. He also talks a lot about kind of his writing process and his experience publishing his first novel called Long Division, and from what I was able to read in these essays, I really want to pick that book up now. Although the content is heavy, the way in which Lehman writes sometimes caused me to laugh out loud. And then there were other times where the writing was just so visceral and raw and honest that it brought me to tears. So overall, I would give this collection of essays 4 out of 5 stars. And that concludes all of the books that I was able to complete in the month of August. However, there is one book, like I said at the beginning, that I am currently about 100 pages from the end, and that is A Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. This is a young adult West African inspired kingdom fantasy. In this book, you get 2 different perspectives. One perspective is a boy named Malik, who at the beginning of the story is with his 2 sisters and trying to make his way into this big city for this festival that happens every year. The other perspective that you get is Karina, who is the princess of this kingdom. Through a series of events, both of the characters that we get perspectives from end up on paths to kill one another, and their storylines kind of wind closer and closer and closer together until they finally actually realize who the other person is. My feelings about this book. So this book actually got me really mad at this book because I kept blaming this book for me not liking this book, and I went through a whole existential crisis, and I was basically like, maybe I don't like young adult fantasy anymore, maybe it's just not for me. And then I had to have a very real sit down with myself and say, Caroline, it's not a book that is ruining another book for you, it's just your life that is ruining this book. What I mean by that is that I started this book at a time where I was very stressed and my mind was just not focused on reading. However, not all hope is lost, because within the last, I would say, like 100 pages, the 2 main characters are finally like for real interacting and defeating monsters together, and my fangirl heart is just entirely here for it. I am not going to star rate this one quite yet because I haven't finished it, if that's okay with everyone. I can do just like a tying up loose ends update in my September wrap up. Okay, wrap ups are hard and exhausting. I tripped over my tongue so many times throughout this video. I had to stop and pause and ponder what I was even saying far too much. So I'm assuming this will be quite choppy, but thank you for sticking around. Until next time, have a great day. Goodbye.